Part 1. It was a foggy night in Paris, the city of love, and a lonely girl stood at the top of the Eiffel Tower. She brushed a loose strand of brown hair off her face as she looked at her surroundings and sighed at the sight of all the happy couples, completely in love. The girl had traveled to Paris in hope of finding true love, but after 4 long years she still hadn't found the man her heart desired, and by now she had grown tired of waiting. She was alone, always alone. She didn't have any friends at the library where she worked, and her family all lived far away. They had contacted her twice in those 4 years away from home. The first time was a few weeks after she had settled in, asking how she had found Paris so far. The second, notifying her that her parents had divorced and were now leading separate lives. Neither appeared to want anything to do with her. She had tried to contact them numerous times after that day, but they never replied. And now, here she was, standing on one of the most iconic buildings in the world, the building that millions think of when love and romance are mentioned. And yet, she was the most alone she had ever been in her life. How ironic. As she admired the amazing view set out before her, she realized how small and insignificant she was compared to the rest of the world. How if she were to simply cease to exist, nobody would really care. The library would just hire another person, and her family, well, they never took any notice of her anyway. They wouldn't even know that she was gone until they were told by the officials, and even then, they might not even remember her at all. Another wave of sadness came over her as she realized that she had no place in the world, that no one in her life would truly miss her. As she stood, contemplating all this, she unconsciously moved closer to the edge of the tower, looking down at the ground so very far below. If someone fell from that height, surely they wouldn't survive. Her thoughts flickered to death. Maybe that was the best thing for her. She had nothing to live for, and no one to mourn her, so why not? A strange calmness came over her as she realized that death was what she wanted, what she craved. She smiled to herself as she stepped right up to the rail, pushing through a crowd of people. She was ready for this. The girl tilted her head back to look up at the night sky one last time, shivering slightly. The fog had lifted, and she was finally able to see the moon and the stars, twinkling and shining, a beautiful contrast to the dark sky. Maybe when she died, she would become a star. She really didn't believe in life after death, but it was nice to imagine that she would belong somewhere and make others happy. Yes, she decided. She would become a star and light some other person's way through all their rough times, just as the stars had done for her. Finally, she would be able to do something worthwhile, to give back to society. She slowly stood by the railing, ready to climb over and jump. Her heart began to race as she anticipated her fall. She was about to swing her leg over when someone tapped her on the shoulder. Slightly annoyed by this delay, she turned to see a concerned-looking man. He was average height, only a couple centimeters taller than her, with short blonde hair and brilliant blue eyes that filled with care as she began to speak, stumbling over words until he gave up on French and just spoke in English. "Come look at the stars." Part 2. The girl was once again looking up at the sky. This time, however, she was lying down on the soft green grass in a little park near the base of the magnificent tower. She glanced to her left to see the blue-eyed man watching her carefully. They lay there, looking at each other in silence for some time, until he spoke. "Do you have any pets?" The girl stared at him in confusion. What was this man talking about? Is this why he had brought her here, to ask if she owned any animals? He was clearly insane and wasting her time. After all, she could have been gone by now. She realized that he was still watching her, waiting for her to answer. "Yes, I have a fish," she said, not wanting to seem impolite. He nodded slowly to himself, then asked another seemingly pointless question. "Does it have a name?" "Rosa," the girl muttered uncomfortably. "And what would happen to Rosa if you disappeared?" He looked her in the eye, and she thought for a while. "I'm not no, this is ridiculous." The girl got up to leave, but the man grabbed her arm. "No, this is important. What would happen to Rosa if you were gone?" The girl stared at the hand gripped tightly, urgently around her arm, and stayed silent. "Who would feed your fish?" She gave a sigh, and looked at the man's face. "I don't know. Nobody, I guess." "And what would happen to it?" She did not answer. "What would happen to it?" he repeated again, louder and slower than before. "It would die," she stated bluntly, just wishing that the man would leave so she could go back and finish what she had started. "Yes, it would die. So that's one other life that would be taken, apart from your own," he whispered. "Just think about how many people you'd be affecting apart from yourself." The girl looked at the man in shock. He had only just met her, and now he was trying to talk her out of the only thing she was sure of? "Why do you even care? It's not like you know me. I've never seen you before in my life," she spat. But the man shook his head. "It doesn't matter if I know you or not. You're going through a tough time, but it always gets better." He fixed his gaze onto her, his sparkling blue eyes piercing into her soul. "No matter how dark it gets, there's always a ray of light that shines through. You just have to wait for the clouds to pass." The girl laughed and rolled her eyes. "That all sounds very deep and meaningful, but I think I'll be going now. It was nice to meet you." She trailed off, realizing that the man had never said his name. The man smiled. "Call me Custos." Part 3. 19 years had passed since the girl had met Custos. During that time, a lot had changed. She was now happily married with 2 beautiful children, both in primary school. Her youngest had a head full of curls, just like the father, and her eldest was tall and lean, the spitting image of her mother. The girl had been promoted, and she finally felt recognized and needed in her workplace. She had also gone out of her way to make friends, and now she had 2 people whom she could always rely on. She was happy, confident, and at peace with life, but she never forgot that one man who stopped her by the Eiffel Tower. The girl had looked him up, searched all the archives for any record of him, but she could not find anything. He seemed to have appeared and disappeared without a trace. Here one minute, gone the next. Nobody even remembered seeing him at the tower. A day had not gone by without her thinking of the mysterious Custos, the man who saved her life. She could never find him and thank him, but she didn't really mind. For some reason, she felt as though he was always watching her. No matter how hard life got, she could feel that it would be all right. After all, it always gets better.